Chapter 6 is all about metabolism. And you've probably heard this word before, but let's give it a definition. Metabolism is all about how organisms use energy to perform chemical reactions. Like this hummingbird is flapping its wings to seek out nectar being produced by this flowering plant over here. And that nectar is produced by photosynthesis. So all of this is using energy in a variety of different ways to execute certain chemical reactions. So here are our learning objectives. We have 8. We're going to define metabolism and take it from there. So first learning objective is to define metabolism. What is metabolism? So metabolism is all of an organism's chemical reactions. So chemical reactions, as we talked about back in chapter 2, are all about making and breaking chemical bonds to produce new and different chemical reactants. So metabolism is a property of life that arises when we have interactions between different molecules within the cell, between different carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. So in organisms, we have different metabolic pathways. What this means is that in order to make a complex molecule, usually we have several different steps in the process. We start with a molecule that is the initial product, and then we end up with something that has been modified maybe several times to come up with a new product. So, for example, maybe we start off with a molecule of glucose, but in order to make that into cellulose, we need to join the different monomers together. Maybe it has to be formed and shaped. But each of these steps is going to be catalyzed by a specific enzyme. So a lot of this chapter is going to be dealing with enzymes, which, as you hopefully remember, are made out of proteins. So simply depicted, you can see we start with molecule A, and then we have an enzyme that's going to enable a reaction to happen, reaction 1, to get product B. Maybe we have a second enzyme that's going to cause a separate reaction to occur to give us product C. Product C may be affected by an enzyme that's going to give us the final product in this metabolic pathway, which is product D. So we go from A to D by enzymes 1, 2, and 3. So that's a very simple version. But actually what's happening in our cells is that all of these metabolic pathways are interconnected to each other. It's very complex. So for example, we can use amino acids to get energy if we have to. We can use different molecules to feed in different pathways so that if we run out of something in the cell, we don't just shut down and die. We are able to have something else take the place of that molecule. Okay, so metabolism is the totality of a cell's chemical reactions. It's typically set up that we have metabolic pathways with several enzymes that may go from one product to a final product. So let's talk a little bit about energy, because metabolism, in order to make metabolism work, to have different kinds of stuff, we're going to have to use energy. So two most important types of energy are potential energy and kinetic energy, although there are several different types of energy. Energy is the capacity to cause change or to do work. Many different forms of energy exist. Potential energy, kinetic energy, heat, which is really thermal energy. Chemical energy is the energy that's stored up in the bonds of a molecule. Light energy, which is electromagnetic energy. We're going to talk more about that when we get talking about photosynthesis, because that light energy can be used, uh, collected by plants and other photosynthetic organisms to uh, produce chemical energy. So energy can be converted from one form to another, just like we see in photosynthesis, light energy being converted into chemical energy. Um, and that's kind of a big part of how life works. So potential energy is the energy of position. So potential energy means you might have the capacity to do work, but it's not being done just yet. So for example, here we have a diver on a diving board. You can see that diver, there's a diver that's diving and converting that potential energy from being high up in the air, can use gravity to dive into the lake. And as they dive, they convert that potential energy to kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is the energy of movement. And when that diver hits the water, all of that kinetic energy is going to be dispersed by the lake. They're going to stop moving eventually. Um, and then they can't, once they're in the water, that potential energy has been converted into just being in the lake. Then they can climb back up, use kinetic energy to climb back up the ladder, climb back up to the diving board, and then once again, they've got that potential energy that they can use to dive back into the lake. So kinetic energy is the energy of movement. Potential energy is the energy that's stored in being in a particular position. All right. So kinetic energy is the energy of movement, energy that is actually doing work, making a change. Potential energy is the energy of position, or energy that is capable of doing work but isn't doing the work just yet. So there's a lot of ways for potential energy to exist. It can be just you're up on a diving board, you're in a high place, that if you were to jump off, gravity would convert uh, convert that potential energy into the energy of movement. But molecules can have potential energy as well, stored up in their bonds. That if we break those bonds, we can release that energy and turn that into a form of kinetic energy. All right, so learning objective 3 is we're going to talk about the first and second laws of thermodynamics and how they are different. So what is thermodynamics? Thermodynamics is the study of energy transformations. How do we get from one form of energy to another? So we have a couple of things to talk about, a couple of terms to define. An isolated system or a closed system is one where it is sealed off from the rest of the universe, more or less. Now, it's very rare that we see a truly closed system. But for example, if you have a cup of coffee in your Yeti cup, it's going to stay hot for a very long time because it's very well insulated. And it's not exchanging any of that thermal energy with its surroundings. But in an open system, energy and matter can be transferred between a system and its surroundings. So if you have a cold drink, an iced drink in a glass, it just sits around on a warm day, the ice is going to melt, and that thermal energy is going to be transferred to the environment. And eventually you're going to have a glass with melted ice or water, and it's not going to stay cold indefinitely. Organisms, like you and I, and single-celled organisms, we are open systems. We are not closed systems. You can't hold your breath for more than a minute or so. without doing lasting damage to yourself. Well, actually, what probably would happen is you'd pass out and you'd start breathing anyway involuntarily. Um, but you can't go for more than a short period of time without breathing, without taking in oxygen, without drinking water, or for that matter, without exhaling, breathing out, exchanging gases, or without sweating, without going using the bathroom. So we are open systems. We are always exchanging energy and materials with our environments. And that's another thing that's true for all organisms. So, first law of thermodynamics or energy transformation is that the energy of the universe is constant. So far as we know, the energy of the universe is constant, which means that energy, we can transfer it or transform it, but we can't just make up new energy or get rid of old energy. We cannot create or destroy energy. So we also call this the law or the principle of conservation of energy. You can't get something for nothing is another way of describing this. So we can convert potential energy into kinetic energy and back into kinetic energy, but we can't just make new energy happen. The second law of thermodynamics says that whenever we transfer or transform energy, those transfers and transformations are not totally efficient. Some energy is going to be unusable. Typically, that waste energy is going to be in the form of thermal energy or heat. So according to the second law of thermodynamics, every energy transfer or transformation is going to increase the disorder or the entropy of the universe. So you can't even break even. So this is the reason why you've never seen a perpetual motion machine. We can't have a machine that we just add a little bit of energy and it just keeps moving forever, because every energy transformation is inefficient, which means as the wheels turn, eventually they're going to dissipate that energy, and some of that energy is unusable. So there's nothing that's 100% efficient. When we burn gasoline in our cars, it produces power to drive the engine, but it also produces heat. It produces less ordered forms of the gasoline, the octane that we put in there. So you might think, well, why aren't we just constantly winding down? And we do wind down over time as we age. But the Earth is constantly getting new energy from the sun, at least it has been for billions of years, and that's not going to change within any of our lifetimes. So here we can see a bear eating a salmon, and the first law of thermodynamics states that we can transfer or transform energy. So the bear eats the salmon. The salmon spent a lot of time eating and turning chemical energy of things that were out in the ocean into salmon biomass, storing up that energy in the form of complex chemical bonds to make fish protein and all those other fish biological molecules. The bear eats it, and that enables the bear to do bear things, run around and look for more fish. So that's energy transformation, chemical energy stored in food we can use to do whatever it is that we need to do as organisms. The second law of thermodynamics says that the bear can eat the fish and the bear can run around, but some of that energy from the salmon biomass that was stored up has to be converted into less ordered forms of energy. Heat, carbon dioxide, and water that were once fish protein, fish carbohydrates that were very highly ordered. The stuff that comes out of the bear is going to be less ordered than when it went into the bear.